Gender politics in the 20th and 21st centuries. So first we'll talk about the final. So, everybody understands the online portion of the final. It's going to be opened up Monday. You can go and do your 40 questions. Any other questions about that? Yes.
Yes, you said we do it online. Do we send it to you, or how does that?
You click on it in the week that is finals week, and you see a new window, and then you click on start, and you get like 4 questions per page, and you go through, and they're multiple choice. And then the first one is matching. I think maybe 15 matching questions. So a list of 15 names, and then 15 questions. You have to pick one each time. And then some multiple choice questions, maybe 10 of them. And so there, it comes out to 40, but then some true-false questions. So you just kind of go through and do them, and the computer records it and gives me the grades, and that works out well for me.
It's just there, and when I'm finished, I'm finished.
You're finished, yeah.
And I just like when you do the forum, it's the same thing.
Well, but there is a practice on the online on Moodle, but it only has 1 question. So I'm going to add a few more questions to give you more practice. I'll add some true, false, and some matching. But yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. If anybody has any questions on anything, call me on my cell phone, which is on the first page of your syllabus. So, or email me.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the first portion on Monday?
Yeah, you can do that anytime, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. The second part, in the classroom during the final exam period, we're going to watch this film for 1 hour. Then you're going to have, it would be good to bring a blue book for that. So bring a blue book and write down 10 issues that you noticed in this film. Write them in the form of questions. And we'll go over 10 today that we heard from the lecturers. Maybe 5 from Nora and 5 from the Roman Catholic priest. So you'll have some ideas, but you can't just bring them in and copy them out. Then I want you to select 3 questions and write a couple of paragraphs on each one, telling how another religion handles this same issue, this same problem. So the example that I gave you on the guidelines for the final. So
I didn't get the paper.
Okay, let's make sure that everybody gets a copy of that. Let's see. Let's just give you this one, and don't worry that it has somebody else's name on it. Okay, so the example that I gave you, when we listened to the Roman Catholic priest, Janice, talk about her life and her struggles to become a priest, having wanted to do that since childhood, having been one of the little girls looking on as the boys got to carry the candle and help out with carrying the Bible and helping out at the altar, which is called an acolyte, A-C-O-L-Y-T-E. She always wanted to do it, but she didn't get to. So one of the questions that, the issues that came up was, she later came to decide that it was unfair. As a child, she just thought, well, that's life. You know, the boys get to it and I don't. She later decided it wasn't fair. And then she and other Catholic women had to deal with the issue of, okay, if there's an unfair law in our religion, what is the best way to approach that situation? So I'm actually not going to write these on the board because I don't want to take the time to write them. So one issue is, when there's an unjust law, what is the best approach for dealing with it? So that will definitely come up in the film because she's in the film. So a lot of the things she raised will come up in this documentary, Pink Smoke Over the Vatican. So as you were working in your groups in the first 5 minutes of class, or actually before class, did you come up with any other issues that Janice raised in her talk? And would anyone like to name an issue that came up during her talk? Summer?
I was saying, like, finding support from the men to back you up on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so a big part of her talk was having this priest, Father Roy Bourgeois, actually come to her ordination and be present and risk his own status in the Catholic Church by being present at it and giving the sermon. And now he's at risk of being expelled from his order, the Maryknoll Fathers. So, so the issue might be, how can we get support for change, and will men support us who agree with us? So then you would look at Judaism and say, when women were working for change to become rabbis in the Reformed and other branches that do have women rabbis, were there men who were helpful to them and supporting them, and did they need that support? You could look at Orthodox women today who are just barely on the verge of having full rabbis and say, to what extent are they calling on men to support them? So that's a good question. Anyone have another one for us? Actually, you could look at women in the Southern Baptists and say, to what extent are they calling on support from men? So not viewing men as the enemy, but as like-minded men being supportive for women, because that's how change comes about. Usually it's not just the oppressed group that can fight all by themselves. They need support from others. So during the 19th century abolition, women were helping out with the abolition issue who were not black. Certainly Sojourner Truth was prominent in that struggle, but white women were helping, white men were helping. So, does anybody have another question, an issue that came up during her talk that caught your attention? Yes?
What about the family? How the family is family?
Yes, that's an important issue. How does her own family view her doing this? And people that she has known all of her life, do they think she's gone crazy or whatever? So you could definitely look at supportive family when you look at Orthodox women working for change. And some of your answers you're going to get from this book, Taking Back God. And some of the answers you'll have to look through other sources. You'll have to look at internet sources, because we haven't, and look at my lectures and at my study guides. Does anybody remember the moment in her talk when she described being a little girl and helping to dust and clean up the altar area called the sacristy, and having a little boy come by and say, "What about this dust?" So that's an example of an important issue that she brought up, and that is, what happens to the hearts and minds of little boys who have the privilege? Does it encourage them to be, to think that they're better, and to encourage them to really put down the little girl and say, "Oh, you didn't dust well enough"? I mean, so that's an issue that came up in her talk. You could extrapolate that to what happens to men in the church who grow up with privilege. Do they tend to exploit women later on because they just assume that that's part of the whole deal, is that men get to do this, women don't? Can women participate fully in worship? Is a basic issue that has come up again and again in this course. We asked 3 main questions in this course. What about God? Is God male? That may come up during the documentary. I don't recall if it does or not. But if she gets an answer from a priest saying, "Well, you can't be a priest because God is," they bring that up. That's definitely an issue that you can apply to Judaism and to Islam. What is the impact of a belief that God is male? What is the impact of having a sacred space that women can't go into? a kind of a gender apartheid. Can women participate fully and provide the sacraments, marry people, birth, death sacraments, baptism, leadership and worship in communion? Why or why not? Who owns the sacred text? Who gets to interpret them? That probably will come up during the film, because if the Catholic Church says, well, only the bishops and the Pope and the leaders get to interpret whether you get to become a priest, then that's ownership of the text. A more basic question that's probably going to come up is, does God give men this privilege? So is this idea that only men can be priests from God? And if so, is God just? Is God fair? So that will probably come up during the film. And you could definitely go into Islam and ask that same question. If there's a belief that women can't be an imam or can't lead a joint worship service, what does that say about God? And so anyway, those are some of the questions. Also looking at Nora's talk, the senior, she asked questions such as, why do some Muslim, she answered questions like, why do some Muslim women wear the full hijab, the veil? And she gave us her answers, and it was her choice. And the Quran says be modest, and she just wanted to. She admired her mother and her mother wearing it. So that's not going to come up in the documentary, but that's one of the questions that you might look for is, what about the difference in clothing, and why do women make these choices? What does it mean to her to wear the priestly garment? It obviously meant a lot to her to be able to wear that. Now we're talking about Janice again. Another point that Nora raised was, what rejection do women get today for following unpopular ancient customs, like veiling? So she experienced some rejection in her high school, especially. All three faiths are going to deal with the question of, how do we handle verses from our holy scriptures that appear to put women in the secondary place, or that appear to be violent? Janice also talked about peacemaking and having demonstrations against the School of the Americas, training the CIA agents to do violent things in Central America. So that may come up in the film. So you can easily apply that question to other religions like Judaism and Islam. How do we handle the verses that appear to be violent? How do we pray was a question that Nora answered for us. And what happens if you don't pray 5 times a day? And she brought up the point of Allah is merciful. She also brought up the point of my grandma prays 24/7. And I would point out, if you're applying that question, that issue to Christianity, that in a letter to the Thessalonians, Paul says, chapter 5, that the scripture says, pray constantly. So that's more than 5 times a day. It actually says, give thanks at all times, pray constantly. Let's see. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. So those are really high standards. And then what if you don't end up doing that? I don't know who can really pray constantly, but some saints probably do. The whole question that she got into of can a Muslim marry a non-Muslim, that we got very, we spent a lot of time on that in class. I'd like to point out that in 2 Corinthians, Paul's second letter to the people in Corinth, chapter 6, he specifically says, don't marry a non-Christian. He says, be ye not unequally yoked together with an unbeliever. And many Christians are very respectful of that today and will not marry a non-Christian. So Actually, myself, when I was in high school, I was taught that as a new Christian. So I was not going to do it. And I had a boyfriend that I was getting increasingly interested in, and I'm like, I can't marry you. It had been a nice relationship, but I can't marry you. Well, he converted. We've now been married 40 years.
Oh.
But he was not going to let that go. And at first I was like, is this a real conversion or not? But over the years, he's actually been, at various points, more active in the church than I have. Yeah. So he's been on the vestry board and the different boards, the different churches that we've had. At times when I was refusing to go because I didn't like the language about God, so I wouldn't even go to church, and he'd be doing everything in the church. So I was like, okay, I guess this conversion is genuine. So anyway, those sorts of issues come up in all religions, so you could definitely discuss. I don't know if that particular one comes up during the film. Probably not. Okay, well, anyway, that's enough. Let's, oh boy, 10 minutes to get into some areas that I want to cover for the last part of the course. So you'll notice on the study guide on the website that there are a bunch of other study guides that we haven't covered. And there are also a couple of video lectures that you haven't heard, but they're on the Moodle site. So these cover the medieval period, women in the medieval period within Christianity, women in the 15th, in the 16th through 17th centuries, 15th through 17th, when witchcraft, there was a big wave of interest in women being possibly witches, and persecutions and executions. So if you want to look at that one, that would be a good idea. There's also a lecture on the 19th century changes where women said, we want our political rights, and we're not going to be held up by you saying that the Bible says X, Y, or Z. So one of the women's battles in the 19th century was to say the Bible supports women's equality. And that required women going in and re-examining different passages of the Bible, ones that we've talked about in this classroom. So those study guides are going to be on the final. So
study guides.
Study guides, like, let me list the numbers. They're like everything beyond 28, like 29, 30, 31 through about 34, I think.
29 to 34.
Yeah. Okay. Then we get to a lecture that will be on the internet soon, but probably isn't there yet because it's happening now. And that is the issue of gender politics in Christianity in the 20th and 21st centuries. So all the issues that we've been looking at in the other religions and in Christianity in earlier centuries are still being fought today within Christianity. So the issue of what do women get to do in worship. In many denominations, it's been opened up that women can be ministers, priests, etc. But are they actually rising up to be the head of a church of 8,000 people? In a few cases, but not so often. Women tend to, when they are having doors open for them in Presbyterians, Methodists, Episcopal churches, they tend to be the smaller churches that let women be the head pastor. A big church with 5 or 6 pastors will have women as one of the assistant pastors. So there's still a lot of room, even within parts of Christianity that are allowing women full equality. There's room to get to the top of leadership within Christianity, not just to have the actual ordination. Of course, then there's churches within Christianity that are just fighting for the right to be a pastor. So that's occurring within Southern Baptist denomination, within some other smaller denominations, within the Roman Catholic Church is fighting for that right. And that's an issue that I address in this article in Sojourners magazine, which was almost 2 years ago, in July 2010. So I have, and this is available on your Moodle site. It's an article in which I discuss inequality within the church and as it occurs today. So I got an email from this magazine saying, could you please do an article on complementarity? And I was initially thinking, complementarity? Why do you want an article? What is it? You know, I was thinking, okay, you want an article on that? I'll do it, whatever it is. I'd be happy to write for you. So, but complementarity is the belief that women have certain roles, men have other roles, and they're different roles. And together, all the work in the church gets done, or all the work in the family, or all the work in the country gets done. So in order to do that research, I decided I needed to go visit some of the main churches that still say women can't be pastors, and women have to have separate roles, primarily home, primarily private sphere, not public sphere. So one of the churches that I went to was just down the road from us. And it is in Sun Valley, and Grace Community Church. How many people here have actually visited that church or attended? Yeah. So I said, you know, that's one of these big mega churches that is not having any women pastors, no women up there preaching. They have a really good preacher named John MacArthur, but no guest preachers now and then as women. So I went there, and I also went down to Orange County to, what's the name of that church in Orange County? Clearly I haven't reviewed this. Anyway, so there are several big mega churches in the LA area. I went to visit them. In the one in Sun Valley, I was really surprised. I expected, you know, there would be no women preaching, no women helping or doing anything. That was true. I was really surprised to see they have a seminary on their large campus. There are many buildings. They have a seminary which is men only. You can't take classes there if you're a woman. So even in the Catholic Church, women can attend all the seminaries, take all the courses, they just can't become a priest. But here, even the education was denied. So that was surprising me. Anyway, so I wrote an article, and you can find more about this subject in that article. The main issue for women today in Christianity, as well as in all three religions, is fundamentalism. So it's, we all have holy scriptures, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the holy scriptures were written 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 1,300 years ago. And in those scriptures, there are things stated that say, actually not so much in the Quran, but women can't do X, definitely in the Bible, statements like that. And in Judaism, it's more tradition that women can't do X. So actually, it's good news for Nora when she prays 5 times a day, that there's nothing in the Quran that says only men need to pray 5 times a day. Women, you don't have to worry about that. No, that's totally equal. Everybody's supposed to be praying 5 times a day. Within Judaism, there got to be this tradition that, oh, it's only the men that really need to pray and study the Torah, not the women. Within Christianity, we have that kind of attitude too, of things that are written a long time ago have to be applied literally in the 21st century. I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm talking kind of fast. But for example, these statements about women be silent in the churches in 1 Timothy. So there's a big debate within Christianity. How do we apply those to the 21st century? And you know what I've presented in class, that there are all these ways you need to approach the passage. You need to look at the translation, is it accurate? You need to look at the author, is it really Paul, or is it somebody writing 100 years after Paul? You need to look at his audience and what the problem was in that church, why he was writing it, and did he intend for it to apply 2,000 years later, or was he really writing to a specific situation? You need to compare other passages of the Bible which have to do with justice. and Jesus' words versus a passage by Paul. So there are a lot of approaches, but within Christianity, as well as within Islam and with Judaism, there are churches that have dealt with these and opened up opportunity for equality for women at every level. But then there are churches that have said, no, the literal meaning is what we have to abide by, and so they're still holding back on full equality for women. So religious fundamentalism is an issue in all three religions. Here's a book that came out of a conference in 1998 called Religious Fundamentalisms and the Human Rights of Women. So it talks about Christian fundamentalism, Muslim fundamentalism, which is so tribally bound and associated with rural areas, Jewish fundamentalism, so beliefs that statements in the Hebrew Scriptures have to be applied today, as far as not doing religious activities when you're having your period. We even heard that within Islam, that some of those beliefs about physical cleanliness are observed within Islam. So gender apartheid is still occurring in the world today within Christianity as well as in the other two religions that we've covered in this course. Another big issue for Christian women today is God language. So trying to encourage churches that do believe that God is not male to use language that reflects that. To challenge your churches not to always say God our Father, but to say God our Creator, God our Shepherd, or to say God our Mother. Some say Mother, Father, God. Another activity is conferences and educational efforts throughout Christianity for Christian women in Africa, in Australia, in South America, definitely in the U.S., having conferences to try to build up and change their church. And I'll just say that I'm wearing a T-shirt from a conference that I organized in Claremont in 2004. It's called Where Wisdom Calls, Crossroads and Open Gates. There's another T-shirt about a conference that was called Walking on Water and Making Waves. So Jesus had a miracle of walking across water. Women today trying to change their roles within Christianity have to practically do miraculous things, like walk on water. And they have to not be afraid to make waves to cause a little trouble. So that's the highlights of gender politics within Christianity. Thank you.